Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs the Podcast. Today's special guest is Jackson Wightman. He is the founder of Proper Propaganda and the author of the Tech PR Playbook. Welcome to the show, Jackson. How are you?
I am well. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thrilled to death to have you here and grateful for you to make the time to visit with us. So I guess let's just kind of maybe start at the beginning before we dig in too much. Let's talk a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, and why we're talking today.
For sure. So I am the founder of Proper Propaganda PR. We are a tech PR and geo agency. Geo stands for Generative Engine Optimization. And we deal primarily with tech companies. We've been around for about 15 years now. And I have spent the lion's share of my career in the comms business. Came out of politics originally, which was a very interesting finishing school, one where I was a little bit baptized by fire, and I've been in the comms business ever since. I guess I am addicted to it.
I love that. We've had other former political PR folks come on here too, and yeah, the war stories are crazy. So, but I have to imagine that nowadays, more than ever, the lines are getting blurrier and blurrier. I mean, it seems like the political campaigns are largely tech campaigns at this point anyway.
They really are, and I think we can thank Barack Obama and his crew for that, probably. But yeah, it's the lines are blurring, and indeed, as you did allude to, it is a very interesting place to come from because though there are many tech founders, and we can name many of them, I'm sure your audience can name many of them, who constantly put their feet in their mouths, coming out of politics, you have to be very conscious of that. It is not always the nicest media environment, it is a hostile one. And so moving into tech, I think, sometimes feels like a Sunday school picnic versus where I came from.
Well, let's talk, I guess, a little bit about just sort of your general subject matter, which is this notion of public relations, but also generative engine optimization. I think that's probably a new term for a lot of people. I think we're used to hearing by now SEO and things like that. But obviously the world's evolving. You know, AI search engines are becoming, well, AI chatbots, but AKA search engines are becoming more and more popular and a better way to find new content and new things. So let's talk a little bit about just sort of how all this ecosystem is evolving and, you know, basically where we land to become generative engine optimization, what that means.
For sure. So I think there's a whole bunch of data, and people probably just know this intuitively from their own lives. There's a whole bunch of data suggesting that search is moving off of that blue link Google business that we've all been using for 25 years or whatever it is now, and moving more into chatbots. And I think there's a range of reasons for that. There's a range of kind of UX reasons that intuitively, again, I feel like most people know the way you interact with a chatbot is fundamentally different than blue links at Google. The way it serves up answers is fundamentally different than blue links at Google. And for us, we sort of got into this by dumb luck. We had a number of consumer tech clients, bigger brands that some of the listeners would probably know, who tend to generate a lot of earned media coverage. They tend to get covered in the tech press, you know, when they release a new product or when their company has an announcement or something. And what we started noticing was this was impacting how and where they would show up in those AI answers to key prompts. So when somebody said, what's the best keyboard for college freshmen working in a dorm, our client would show up, and we started investigating why this was. And what we found was a lot of the work of kind of traditional PR, classic PR that marketers would know, intersected with how AI was serving up answers and what AI was citing and sourcing when it served up answers. So that's how we kind of came to it. I think it is a brave new world. It's a world we've been pretty heavily involved in for about 18 months, and I think that mirrors a lot of other people's experience, but this is the way search is going, and I think this is now a mediator of discovery on the internet, and maybe a mediator throughout the entire buying journey for certain types of products that we'd probably call more considered purchases.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just sort of the evolution. We were talking briefly before the show. I mean, obviously, this is a fast-moving target here, so things are changing all the time. And when I first started hearing people talking about here on the show about the notion of, you know, basically trying to train AI to see your website or pull your data, we were still sort of in the era of the AI systems had basically scrubbed the internet for data. They'd been trained on these models. But, you know, Claude could only look back to 2023 or whatever it was. You know, there were these gated windows of data that they actually had, meaning that if you weren't already in there, you weren't getting in there. And so, but now we have, all the chatbots are searching the web and they're doing all kinds of other things now, meaning that strategy has probably evolved some from, getting in on the early training models versus now something that can go find you in real time. So can you talk about just even, I don't know, you could probably call it less than 18 months, but the last maybe 12 months of evolution in AI has been so rapid. I wonder if you talk about just how that strategy sort of began and then, where it looks like we're now.
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. And I always like to sort of think of this as having 5 distinct elements. And so one is web architecture. Is your site built as a brand for AI bots to even be able to see it, be able to visit it? And I think 12 months ago, 16, 18 months ago, a shocking number of websites were beautifully designed for human beings because human beings were the primary, most websites' primary traffic source was human, not unhuman, which has changed. But the first question is kind of, can bots read a site? Can AI crawlers find a site and find information on it so that they can pull information? So element number 1 is always web architecture and how a site is built and structured. Element 2, I would say, in getting present and being present and optimizing presence on these generative engines, these AI chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude, is probably PR and earned media. And so 27% of AI answers in aggregate pull from journalistic sources. So if you want to be present in AI, you'll probably need to be present in traditional press, which is an interesting thing because AI is kind of helping kill traditional press in some ways. It's very hard for media companies to keep up when their content is being scraped and when AI bots aren't really sending traffic to their websites. But the source material coming from media companies is very important to AI. So element number 2 is typically PR. Element 3 is SEO. Most of your audience will know what that is. Some of the sort of playbook and some of the best practices that we've sort of seen for structuring content or structuring websites from SEO still prevail. So that's element number 3, SEO. Element number 4 is content. So you, as a brand, probably produce content. Maybe it's video, maybe it's written, whatever it is. You want to make sure that your content is structured to answer prompts that matter to you. So if you are a keyboard company, using my example again, you may want to write articles about, who the keyboard is for. So why this portable keyboard is great for students or something like that. And then element number 5, I think, if we're thinking about geo and thinking about how you're building strategy, element number 5 is metrics. So this seems to be a very, very metrics-driven realm, and you need quite a bit of data and you need quite a few smart humans interpreting the data to understand where to focus your efforts, because it's this 5-part disparate realm. And as I think you would know, you told me you're coming from a creative background, that's a lot of really different kids in the sandbox, right? The web guys aren't always down with the PRs, and the PRs and the SEOs don't always get along. So it's this new discipline that brings together a disparate bunch of people from disparate realms, and they all kind of have to play nice in the sandbox.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, talk to me about what does PR even look like in this day and age? I thought it was interesting what you said there about, a lot of attention, even in such modern times, is still being drawn from earned media and and placement in, I guess, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, proper media sources or traditional media sources. Yep. I assume a piece of that is that these AIs are trying to stay as true and accurate as they can. So they're going to as high of trust institutions as they can. I guess that's totally debatable. But, I imagine that's the logic in going to those kind of platforms, is that you're trying to find high trust sources instead of just picking sources randomly off the internet. But I think it also, maybe it's a good thing, but it kind of makes it a little tougher to game. I think a lot of people could, just publish articles or have AI write articles all day long and really build kind of a fake database of, look how famous I am. But by being stuck on the traditional media, at least there's a little bit of, I don't know, you still have to have done something and somebody has to have recognized it. So I wonder if you just talk about sort of the role PR plays today. I think a lot of people have stayed out of PR or maybe think they're going to get out of having to do it as often because of AI. And so I wonder just kind of what your take is on the state of AR or state of PR and how people should be addressing it as part of this strategy.
It's a really interesting subject matter, a question, because PR, I think for many years, maybe decades, has been a little bit of a redheaded stepchild. It's been like, oh, this is really nice, but it's kind of fluffy and we can't really measure it. And I think the advent of performance marketing, which has dominated I think, a lot of marketers' thinking for the past 20, 25 years, really put PR into a position where it was sort of a nice to have, and some people thought it was soft and not worth spending a lot of cash on. That's changed with AI. The business is undergoing a renaissance that I have never seen in my 23 or 24-year career in it. So why is that happening? As you said, for whatever reason, AI crawlers, AI bots, AI systems tend to like or tend to view earned media sources as highly trustworthy. So there's a renewed focus on getting into the right kinds of earned media. And what it's done is very interesting to PR. So typically, when I started, that you can see from my gray hair, when I started, really it was a volume game. Most clients would say, get us into the biggest media you can, get us into as many big media as you can, and do it as much as you can. So it was just kind of more and more and more. What we're seeing in the AI age is that sometimes AI engines are weighting very small websites that I and you might not have ever heard of, and certainly many people in the world haven't heard of, but weighting them disproportionately heavy. So instead of these campaigns that are kind of, I would liken to kind of carpet bombing runs, where it's just volume, 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 PR is becoming a little bit more surgical, and we're getting to a place where three or four of the right outlets um, will do a lot for your presence across the 5 or 10 biggest prompts that you're monitoring. And so you just want to get there. And so people are spending, I think, disproportionate or newly disproportionate amounts of time and effort on outlets that do a lot of heavy lifting versus just saying, okay, like we got a tech campaign and we're going to need TechCrunch, Forbes, The Verge, all of them, like 20 more of them to make this a success. The right 2 or 3 placements that are influencing AI systems, and the way you figure that out is with monitoring software. The right 2 or 3 placements can mean as much as 20 placements used to mean in the sort of carpet bombing era, if that makes sense. So the business is undergoing a renaissance. It's more important than it used to be, and I think that's reflected in agencies' revenues and stuff like that. You see valuations of agencies going up these days, but also the nature of the craft, particularly the craft of media relations, which has always been a central preoccupation of PR, has changed to a more surgical one versus big old bombs all the time. Volume, volume, volume.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And actually, I've got kind of a theory about this, which is that basically when AI is unleashed, everything can become so noisy and you just end up in a world full of just chaos, right? I always use this example of like, this post-apocalyptic street corner in Tokyo where every piece of glass is a moving screen and it's just chaos. Yet under the streetlight over here, we've got a little ramen stand, and it's the one thing that stands out, the one human thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and as you're talking, that really got me thinking about that, which is this notion about sort of interpersonal or human relationships. I mean, PR basically got started for public relations. I mean, the whole idea was that you were trying to interact with the public, and I think technology has made it really easy to just run ads, in sort of carpet bombing fashion, like you were talking about. And I think that has led to this, just glut of information. And so as AI is starting to rise, and like we were talking about earlier, I mean, trust is kind of the thing. Like, I mean, the more high trust you can be, the better, because the AI is at least programmed to try and deliver the best information, right? And so by increasing our sort of PR presence, I guess, or the way that we're presenting ourselves in public, at least the source is us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of, some website or like we were talking about before where you could just spin up AIs to just write blog posts all day or whatever, instead, it's you on stage, or it's you being presented in a thing that, being shown up showing up somewhere in some piece of media, whether earned or bought. But there's a relationship between you and the AI, so to speak, that's sort of this one-to-one where it's like, okay, I'm at the source. The source is Jackson in this case. And so I'm wondering if that isn't sort of part of the rise of this whole PR thing, which is almost getting back to fundamentals, which is, despite the crazy tech that we have going on over here, that it's actually the fundamental human to human relationships that are going to start to become more and more important. Sort of like you're saying, they might, or the AI might crawl, the individual author's website, that you've never heard of, versus some, New York Times bestseller list or something to go get this piece of information. And a big part of that is getting to the source. I'm talking to the guy that said the thing.
Absolutely. And the renewal of perhaps us placing value on the human, as you're kind of alluding to, is fully on. And I think we're already seeing that with one particular realm of PR. Typically involves kind of thought leadership, and you've seen this, your listeners have seen this, where an executive or perhaps a series of executives from a company will produce content that's in line with their particular bailiwick or their particular expertise. And that could be quite useful, and that's always been something PR has pushed. I think what we see now is when that content is made with AI, most of us can now tell when content is made with AI. I think AI writing in particular, I know you're coming from creative background, but the written background, AI writing, and for those of us who write a fair bit normally as humans, is very easy to spot, and that's caused and precipitated a lot of backlash for various executives at various companies since this started happening, because I think the initial reaction was, okay, AI likes content and we'll frame it up right and we'll just churn it and churn it out and stuff like that. And now we're seeing people being de-indexed, people being kind of penalized effectively by AI systems for this. So there is indeed, I think we are experiencing and we will continue to experience, and kind of happy about this on a personal level, a renewed value placed on the human, because we are inundated with slop and crap, and I think people are becoming wise to that and have become wise to that fairly quickly in the grander scheme of things. So it's an interesting time for sure. There are certainly plenty of organizations that think they can still try to pass this off, both on human readers and on non-human readers. But I think that slop is going to be a shorter episode potentially than we might have thought, if we look back on it in 5 years or something like that, because it's so obvious.
Yeah, and that's what I think I like about this sort of more, it seems like a more optimistic view, there's so much stuff in the news today about, AR is taking, or PR, or AR, AI is taking our jobs. It's, going to put humans out of business. People aren't going to be able to work anymore or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like this is just another iteration of technology. I think it's got a name that freaks people out because it has this notion of intelligence. But at the end of the day, it's still just a computer system. It's still just running ones and zeros. It's still, it might be the best that we've got yet, but it's definitely still just a computer.
I think too, these companies out of Silicon Valley and these founders, I'm picking on Sam Altman and I'm picking on Dario Amodei for sure. These people are disastrous communicators. Amodei is a little more calculating. I think Altman is just a disaster. He needs significant media training. But AI has a little bit of a PR program, and that's driven primarily by the front men for commercial AI applications. And I'm talking about Altman and Amodei in particular. But these guys have done... Amodei is very, very... Anthropic, the people who make Claude, have always been at the forefront of, hey, it's coming to take every job and all of these things. And then you go and you play around with Claude and you're like, wow, this is literally a piece of garbage, this thing, what the output. So I'm not sure it's quite taking our jobs yet. What it is producing for now, and I understand that could change, is not especially impressive across a range of tasks that apparently Dario Amodei says it's going to replace humans for. Could change. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. Sam Altman as well, I think he's done a very poor job of communicating AI, of communicating its impact potentially on the workforce. And that has not only fostered a range of unnecessary malaise, in my opinion, but also I think people are starting to view these companies for what they are, which is, for-profit companies who have an agenda. And they're both IPOing this year. We know those IPOs are going to be absolutely stratospheric, probably bigger than Elon's recent SpaceX exercise. And, this may have been the goal all along.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, and I actually think it's for me, it's really encouraging. I think these big technological shifts have come in over time. I mean, think about the move to from horses to cars and things like that.
Yeah,
These things have happened. Where sure, yeah, I mean, the guys that shoe horses now we need less of them. So there's a
yeah,
shift in the market, and people go find other work and stuff like that. So I'm not so naive to say that AI maybe won't displace some things at some point in the future. But
sure,
what I'm hopeful of is that it's almost like a reverse industrialization, which is it does the menial work so people can do more meaningful work.
right.
And that's my hope anyway. I mean, I don't know if it'll end up that way. Maybe we'll all just be indentured to the AI overlords, but I'm hopeful that basically, people have the opportunity to do things that they weren't maybe able to do because they're not having to do so much of the menial stuff. So
I think so.
I have a pretty rosy outlook, but we'll see.
That's my hope as well. I mean, we were talking about sort of AI's reliance, over reliance, perhaps, from a citation perspective on media. It is definitely, I'm not naive. I know that AI is killing certain industries, and indeed, as you alluded to, certain jobs. Your example with the kind of the guys who put shoes on horses. It's interesting. I think it's hurting developer jobs. It's doing a range of hurting a range of industries. Media industry, it's for sure hurting because we're in this zero click universe where somebody searches for something on a chatbot and they don't typically click forward as they did with Google's blue links. So there are absolutely things that are happening in terms of job loss and industries that are being affected. I think too, as we experience with smartphones, there will be, I am sure, in 5 years, maybe less, studies about the cognitive impact of AI and how it somewhat rewired our brains in a way, the same way smartphones kind of rewired our brains and destroyed our attention. There's definitely cause for concern there. In my opinion, does that negate it? Does that mean that these better sides, particularly the side you're referring to, where we get away from menial and maybe have more time for higher end thought, is not going to happen? No, I think it's great that these things are going to happen. The move away from the menial, but there are still little points of concern that I would have, both in business and both as as a member of a society, a person who associates with young people and things like that.
Yeah. So I guess with all that in mind, sort of, stepping back into our current reality and away from sort of this, blissful future we're starting to paint.
Yes.
Have you come across anything maybe in the last year, last 18 months, whatever? I mean, obviously this is moving really quickly. It could even be in the last 6 months that, really stopped you in your tracks and just had you go, okay, this is the thing that changes everything. Like, have you been so impressed by any aspect of this technology or anything that outside of just day-to-day functional work, like have you noticed anything that's like a real game changer for you?
Um, no. And then I looked at our P&L. And what I mean by this is I think a bunch of little cumulative things have precipitated a big thing. And I don't think my business is alone. So we're a B2B service business. It's a knowledge-based business, a PR agency. Our revenue grew for 3 years while the headcount went down. And I think there are a lot of others who are probably in a similar situation. To me, and this may be something you can relate to running a creative shop, headcount and revenue have always kind of had a symbiotic relationship in the past where they've, as one goes up, as I make more revenue, I need more people. That seems to not be an automatic equation anymore, an automatic symbiotic relationship. And I guess for me, with less of a big moment, but more of like kind of a crazy realization and an interesting one that you can run more, you can do more with less effectively.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And obviously we've seen it too. I mean, even in just my own personal things, like I'm working on a book and a handful of other things, but like
Yeah.
the distance I'm able to cover by myself now, where in the olden days, especially like as it pertains to the web and stuff like that, in the past, like, I'm just old enough that there was a before time and an after time for me. There was a before the internet and then an after the internet. And in those early days, if I wanted to be online, I had to learn some code. So I learned some basic
Yeah.
coding and things like that. And I learned enough to just be dangerous, but that's about it. But even with my little sort of fundamental knowledge, and I spent about 6 or 8 months as a fractional CMO at a software startup. Um, that combined experience has powered my ability to make like the craziest stuff I've ever built,
Yeah.
myself using these different AI coding platforms and IDEs like Cursor. And I've been able to really, I guess, amplify or magnify the things that I'm capable of doing on my own. You mentioned earlier the web developers and the programmers who are really being hit by this stuff. And I think, my case is a perfect example. Like I used to hire all that stuff done, and now
Yeah.
I can do a lot of it on my own, especially in the conceptual realm and stuff like that. If I'm selling it or
Yeah.
something, or, we're doing it as an agency, like we still follow a more traditional route, just, I guess for the guarantees of specialization and people understanding that world. Where if I'm
Hmm.
just trying to get an idea out and I want to see if this website will work or something, my ability to, I guess, it used to be prototype, but now I can actually run something out that is clickable and usable. It has really supercharged me. So to your point, I think the ability for smart people to really excel and do more with the skills that they've already got, I think
Yeah.
is going to be where the skill sets matter around AI, which
Yeah.
is, can you actively pilot the ship? The people I think are going to struggle are maybe this next generation or two down who are going to grow up on this thing and are going to get
That's
just so used
it.
to being able to ask their device to do something that there's no need to learn how to do it. I always joke, I have a 15-year-old son, he's my
Uh-huh.
youngest, and I always kind of joke with him because he's on his phone and he thinks he's so smart and so tech savvy and all this stuff, and I go, well, my generation built that so that you didn't have to think about it. And so somebody that was my
Yeah.
age that, had to learn how to program to get on the internet, design,
Yeah.
iOS and these platforms. And then these
Right.
young kids have a disconnect. They know how to navigate that technology, but they don't understand the fundamentals that built it. And I think that that's what I'm
No,
afraid of for like people who are active in AI right now is they're not going to understand the technology itself, but they're going to know how to pilot it. And
correct.
which is maybe okay, but like the best fighter pilots have some understanding of their jet. Like you
Correct.
need to have
No,
some
totally.
mechanics to be really good at.
It's an excellent analogy. And look, I think as with many of these things, um, reps matter. It doesn't really matter that I don't have the reps in to sew my clothes because it's the year 1300 or something. I understand that the nature of which reps matter changes. And again, I don't want to be Chicken Little saying the sky is falling, but reps matter too, I think. And when you get into a world where it's mostly piloting something somebody else made, it's a different kind of rep, and you don't get the like, hey, here's how we build it kind of reps, which
Yeah.
which are
Yeah.
good
And
reps to
I
have.
guess, yeah, it's not all about being a technologist, for example, but to use even just your clothing metaphor, right? It's like there's a level of critical thinking that's necessary to understand how something works or
Correct.
why. Like, I don't know, maybe you're in the woods and you do need to make a garment or you've got to patch a shirt
Right.
or something. And, I don't know how to sew, but I can, okay, I understand, okay, you take the needle and it goes through. Oh, well, there's probably got to be a
Yeah.
knot there so it holds, like you can start putting it together. But I feel like we're putting in so many of these like easy safety catches for kids and for people who
Yeah.
are not going to have to be critical thinkers to be able to use this stuff,
Yeah.
that muscle, whatever that is, that helps you sort of decode whatever it is you're using, I think is going to be missing for a lot of folks, and I'm not sure that's a good thing.
You talked about having a 15-year-old kid. You said your youngest is 15. I think too, like, friction is good. And we inhabit this highly frictionless world at the moment. It is a world, I think, with less friction than ever has been. And maybe that's just the trajectory of things. Maybe we're all heading to this world of no friction. But a frictionless world also is not necessarily, in my opinion, like the best thing for development of specific skills, because sometimes when people kind of grow up with no friction, whether that's, they can get an answer from AI or Jeff Bezos brings it that day or whatever the hell it is. Good things can come out of friction. Creativity can come from friction. Uh, New approaches to solving a problem come from friction. And we're getting to where it's like, lots of stuff is not too painful anymore.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about it because I think adversity is kind of where, I mean, is obviously one of the things in the consumer space, and especially as AI is growing and
Yeah.
some of these other things. I mean, in order for our companies to really stand out, there is a little bit of adversity here. Like we're all learning at the same time.
Yeah.
There's this kind of almost like an arms race for people trying to figure out what technology to chase and which thing we should be working on because there's so many new and
Yeah.
evolving technologies. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about just sort of, I don't know, AI shopping in general, consumer
Yeah,
behaviors, and how those are starting to evolve and how companies are starting to address them in our new world?
for sure. So I think in terms of consumer behavior, we are seeing greater adoption of AI, and there's plenty of data to back that up. I don't think that's a great revelation. But in my opinion, and this is largely based on being the owner of a business that is now getting a lot more leads from AI, but also having a number of clients who are seeing the exact same thing. And these are more consumer facing companies than mine. This thing, these engines are still viewed. People have a nuanced relationship with them, but primarily I think they're still viewed as neutral oracles, not necessarily as kind of the pattern matching monkeys, the aggregators that they are. And for me, that's a big opportunity for anybody running a consumer business, because I think the majority of Americans or English people or whatever market you're going into, whatever market you care about, are still viewing the answers they get from these chatbots as kind of unbiased, uninfluenced answers. And there's a few reasons for that. One, it doesn't look like Amazon, where when you search for something, there's a pile of sponsored content that shows up, or look like Google, which has the same problem. But I think people still sort of view AI as more I than A, when in fact it's probably more A than I. And that's a big opportunity for brands. We counsel all of our clients, and indeed, I think we drink this Kool-Aid ourselves as well. Um, what works? There's a lot of noise and a lot of headlines about aggregate data and what you should do to influence AI engines. So one of the kind of big pieces of folk wisdom is get on Reddit if you want to be on Google, or get on YouTube, or if you care about ChatGPT, get on Wikipedia. All of these things in aggregate are backed up by data, and they are true in aggregate. Often they're not true at all on an individual level. The site that influences AI most for our business is our own website. Now, we're in the PR business. We don't have tons of people yelling and screaming about us on Reddit, and neither do any of our competitors. Could that be why? I guess so. I don't know. But I think what we're seeing is there's value in the aggregate data. There's value in occasionally looking at large end studies or reading the headlines or whatever. But the most and the best programs, and the most important thing in a program, if you're trying to do this to optimize your company for this new world, is to really look at your own monitoring software, whether that's Scrunch or Profound or any of these, and go with what it tells you. Don't go with some expert who's writing a kind of how-to playbook and needs to make big sweeping generalizations, because what we see on an individual level never matches up with aggregate data. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about just sort of the notion of early adoption. I think right now there's something going on where there's kind of a lot of FOMO. I even had a client reaching out to me the other day who apparently has been getting Claude ads all of a sudden. And he texted me and he goes, "Dude, what's a Claude and do I need it?" And I mean, I was kind of blown away that he didn't know that one, because I've been using Claude and other platforms for a long time, but I'm closer to
Yeah,
it. In my business, I have to
sure.
look closer to it and see what's happening. And so I've watched these platforms evolve a little bit, but I just thought it was interesting because the idea was I don't even know that I want it or need it. I don't even know what it is, but do I need to have that?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, obviously in your line of work, you're probably staying pretty current and trying to stay up on what's happening. But for your average small business owner or whatever, I mean, I think there's this fear of missing out, or this, concern that they're going to fall behind if they don't do something. Do you think we've
Yeah.
already crossed a threshold where companies are behind if they're not engaging in this? Or do you think that, there's still plenty of room to get on board?
No, I don't think anybody is behind, and I think there's plenty of room to get on board for sure. So let me be a voice of optimism and calm, because I know there is one of the effects of a lot of cumulative noise, as you just alluded to, is like people going, "Holy cow, I'm screwed if I don't." You're not screwed if you don't. You're fine. And I think, at least for a lot of those discovery level prompts, we're talking about considered purchases, right? Like, I'm not going to go to AI and ask it if I need to buy a Snickers or an O. Henry bar. Those are impulse purchases typically made in the moment. Maybe I already have things in my head about Snickers or things in my head about O. Henry. There's a range of purchases where I don't think people are going to consult LLMs. Considered purchases, it's a different deal. And I think if you are a company making products or selling services that are kind of bigger considered purchases, you might want to think about this. Does that mean that every spa in Columbus, Ohio needs to be spending 5 or 10 grand or 20 grand a month on geo? Absolutely, it doesn't mean that. But I think you want to at least get a snapshot of how and where you're showing up. Doesn't mean you need to go crazy and optimize it. If you are that spa in Columbus, Ohio, you're not competing against the spas in New York City. You're competing in a local market, and you might just want to see where you stand against the other 5 or 10 spas in Columbus, Ohio that you're competing against. A snapshot can be enough. A snapshot every quarter, twice a year can be enough. Doesn't need to cost oodles and oodles of money. This can be done fairly cheaply. So I think people should probably dip their toes in the pool if they are a considered purchase. They should not freak out in general. And there's a tendency, we used to hear this a lot in PR. You talk to, I grew up in Montreal, small businesses in Montreal that would say to me, get me in the New York Times. I was like, no, I understand when you want to be in the New York Times, but wouldn't being in like the local neighborhood paper be just as good for you actually getting foot traffic to your store? And the answer was almost always yes. I think that applies with AI a little bit too. If you want to dip your toe in the pool, it's probably a good idea, but just understand you're not competing against, if you're a little independent electronics retailer, you're not competing against, Best Buy in a global sense. You're operating in your particular market. So people just need to keep calm and keep context in their head when they dip their toes in the pool, because there's a tendency to go and, oh my God, we got to go spend thousands of dollars. You don't.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things. So, like with SEO, and there was kind of a craze around SEO for a while. I mean, the nice thing with at least SEO in its most basic form is it's kind of one and done. You update your website, you tag everything properly, whatever, and at least you have some semblance. So you can move yourself into a world where SEO is sort of managed. But with AI, it's changing all the time. And I'm wondering, like, is there anything we can be doing to hedge, like, as we're trying to find experts, because I think there's probably a lot of guessing still going on just because the technology is moving around so much. I mean, obviously, it sounds like some things have started to kind of bubble to the surface, geo being one of those things that are becoming more commonplace or becoming more known that this is how these platforms operate. But how do we, I guess, sort of avoid the scammers? Or is there anything we should be looking for, if we're trying to work with an expert in this kind of space and we do want to dip our toe into AI or start to become known in there?
Sure.
How do we, I guess, or are there any red flags, things like that we should be watching for in terms of people who might just be guessing more than they're actually basing it on something real?
For sure. So there's a couple of things that I think one has to ask anytime procuring expertise, but there are a couple of things specific to geo that I would ask if I was thinking about dipping my toe in the pool. The first thing is, I mean, like any purchase of expertise, ask them to show you tangible proof of what they've done. Case studies are inherently problematic in my view in some contexts, because what I did in the past doesn't necessarily predict what I did in the future. But you still want to see them so that it's not just some guy, talking off of notes that ChatGPT have aggregated from the internet for him when he's on the sales call. Definitely ask for casework and definitely ask for those kinds of insights. And people should have a perspective, as they should with any kind of expertise, and get them to kind of explore that perspective, look at their content around their particular point of view on the subject matter. In terms of geo, anybody who doesn't speak to the importance of monitoring software and monitoring first, I would be wondering about, I would be suspect of, because, as I said, so much of what we do in geo comes from seeing what sources are being scraped by which LLM. And LLMs scrape from very different sources. They weight different sources differently. So you really need any program to have monitoring as kind of a very important and a kind of, there's a primacy to monitoring, I think. Any expert who doesn't speak to that would be a problem for me. The other thing I think that any expert is going to do for geo is they're going to probably, beyond sort of speaking to the primacy of monitoring, they're going to start with customer research. And so, if just by way of example, if you come to me and you say, okay, man, I'm ready to do this, let's go, ready to start thinking about how we're optimizing our business and content for geo, I need to know what LLMs your customers are using. If I go and optimize for Claude, but all your customers are on ChatGPT, we are literally going to flush your money down the toilet. So when you're purchasing, don't just look at the case studies, get those, get perspective, but make sure that there are people speaking to the primacy of monitoring. And then the second thing, the primacy of research, because anybody who just jumps in and says, okay, we're going to start optimizing for this and this and this, you might end up optimizing for the wrong LLM, for the wrong AI engine. And that's going to cost you tons of money.
Yeah, no, a couple really interesting things in there. I mean, one, and it hadn't even occurred to me, but I am guilty of using different GPTs or different chat tools for different things, right?
Yeah.
I use ChatGPT for one realm of stuff. You know, most of our little, you know, I don't know, ask it a stupid question. Hey, is that real? You know, what about this? That kind of stuff tends to go through ChatGPT. Little heavier load stuff, like I'm using platforms like Claude Desktop and some of these other things to run automated tasks, things like that. So, but both platforms could probably do it, but I find myself sort of isolating different products based on what they seem to be doing best for me in my work, in my use cases. So it's an interesting point, because I guess I hadn't really thought of that, but I guess it's sort of akin to, I don't know, different media types. I don't know if you were buying ads or something, you know, and you were going to do your local paper, you know, some national magazine and an online ad or something. Like, you need to do your research and understand who's looking at what. So, and in this case, you know, it's evolution of technology. Each of these platforms are unique and different in their own ways. And so without that monitoring step that you talked about, you know, it would be unknown. You'd just be shooting into the, you know, into space, hoping that, that it works. And
that's
and
what
so
a lot
really
of
interesting.
a lot of the programs that we've seen are doing that. They're just shooting into space, assuming that, you know, because Google and ChatGPT have the traffic, that those are the platforms to optimize for. What we learned is, like, a lot of B2B people are using Claude. We also see with a number of our clients, we have a number of clients that are kind of more complex B2B businesses. People are using different LLMs across different prompts. And so as they move down the sales funnel, think of a B2B software product that, you know, the sales funnel is fairly complex. They're using different LLMs at different points in the sales funnel, which is interesting too. So maybe as another thing to make sure your expert knows what the hell they're talking about, do they advocate for the fact that you need to monitor prompts across the entire sales funnel, not just at what's the best B2B accounting software for businesses in healthcare or something like that? You want to monitor the whole funnel, and you want to understand that, you know, Jimmy might use ChatGPT at the top of the funnel and then switch to Claude or Perplexity midway down, and as he moves through it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting thought. And I mean, I guess it does make total sense if you really stop and think about it, because there's just like different media channels or different, you know, different venues or something that you're going to try and, you know, market into. So, I mean, it makes sense that they would be different. But yeah, it's funny because I think there's like this catch-all phrase, you know, about AI. It's just AI. So it's just, I think the notion is that, oh, okay, well, I just need to be ready for AI, whatever that means.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's really good. So
it's important, and yes, I just want to add one thing. I mean, one thing I was going to say, treat LLMs like their own ecosystem, typically. So I saw a stat the other week. ChatGPT and Claude cite the same content in an answer, in the same, like an answer to the same prompt, only 8% of the time. That's freaky, right? Like, the canon these things are pulling from to give you that answer to what is the best laptop for travelers, it's totally different.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Well, and I find even just the voice of the platforms to be different, and so the type of output that I get. Although I will just say, I've discovered that our Chat GPT in our family, and I don't know if this is just trained by us or encouraged by us, but he's getting a little fast and loose, like with the language stuff. Like he's getting a little wild. Like we went to this movie, Young Washington, last night, and afterwards we put into it, you know, hey, you know, how accurate is this? What's all this going on? and I can't recall what it said, but something expletive, like this, I can't even believe how true this thing was or whatever, but it was just, it's really funny. But I mean, it probably talks the way my teenage sons talk to it, which is how it's being
Right.
trained to speak.
Right.
But it's just,
That's
it's
funny.
kind of hilarious how it's taken on this persona. And it's like, man, you got to back off a little. Like you're getting a little strong for us.
You need a swearing jar for that thing, man.
Yeah, no joke. I would love if ChatGPT wanted to put a little money in a jar for us. That'd be awesome.
There we go.
So I wanted to talk, just kind of reverting back to PR a little bit and talking
Sure.
about it. I think we talked about it earlier, sort of the notion of sort of, I guess, the human role in here. And I will say that, with digital marketing, I think broadly, but also now in AI, it gets really easy to sort of take your eye off the end consumer and to start thinking about people almost as this digital thing. I'm feeding my money, my ones and zeros into this machine, and it's just making sales happen. Like we're not really thinking about those individuals. But I think in AI, as you were talking about earlier, it's going to be more and more important that you actually do focus on the people you're trying to reach, the actual individual, the human being that engages with your product. So I wonder if you talk about, just as PR is evolving, what a sort of, I guess, a PR engagement would look like nowadays for, let's just say our average, B2B company or B2C company, whatever's more in your expertise. But if you're trying to encourage somebody, let's say a smallish business, they don't have a gazillion dollars to throw at this, but maybe they're trying to grow a business, launch a book, or start we were talking earlier about sort of like a thought leadership sort of world or something like that. There's a lot of business leaders that want to go down that road. So maybe talk a little bit about just sort of what that looks like in today's environment versus the past.
Sure. Look, I think in the past, a lot of what PR did was focus on what traditional media outlets, and I don't just mean like it's a newspaper versus something online. I just mean like actual media outlets with a masthead, with an editor, with writers working at that outlet. A lot of time and energy for the bulk of the existence of PR as a discipline has been focused on that. So that's everything from the local entertainment blog in your city to Forbes magazine to the BBC or the New York Times or whatever, CBS or ABC, like traditional media. Now, you're still probably going to, in the age of AI, focus on those things for the reasons I've alluded to a few times, which are that sometimes those outlets are heavily scraped. You're going to look, though, now at also other environments where you might be able to get your message out and connect with people. And some of these other environments might be community forums that focus on a specific niche. They might be a place like Reddit on specific subreddits relevant to your product or your business or things like that. You need to be very careful how you participate in Reddit, because if you sound too promotional, the villagers are going to be at your door with pitchforks and it's not going to end well. But I think the area of focus has moved from one in a PR context that was very traditional media focused to a kind of more fragmented universe. And how do you sort through where and what fragments in that fragmented universe to focus on? You do it with a little bit of monitoring software, with having a snapshot about, hey, this is what's moving the needle in terms of discovery. These are the outlets and these are the environments and these are the places that ChatGPT is going to Claude is going to surface answers when people query about my category, my industry, my business. So I think you just need to be a little bit more open if you are starting this or thinking about starting this, to PR as being something beyond traditional media relations. And you need to kind of direct your energies where the data says to direct them to, if showing up in AI is one of the goals of your PR effort, which it probably will be, given that we are in the world we're in, where a lot of buying is mediated by these AI systems.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you just used kind of a key word there, if, which is, that there's actually a decision to be made here. Do we need to push for AI or don't we?
Yeah.
And, like you were using examples earlier of sort of maybe the local electronics store, the local whatever, someplace that really depends on foot traffic from the neighborhood, for example, versus somebody who's trying to compete maybe regionally or beyond. And it seems like, I could use ChatGPT to do my research and still walk over to the local electronics store and buy my thing, right? So, I mean, it actually... Yeah. So there's maybe an argument there that I, as the local place, don't even need to bother with AI, or marketing specifically for AI.
You might not.
Still cases, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate on that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's interesting. The way you might need to care is different, right? So my wife ran a very kind of cool general store boutique place in Montreal a number of years ago, and she was regularly she got foot traffic to her store, but she was regularly kind of listed in travel magazines and travel media outlets as kind of one of the cool shops to visit in Montreal if you were there for a weekend. And I think that sort of thing is an interesting angle to play up. Like, and that's something where you could game AI because, if you're a tourist flying into Boston for 3 or 4 days over a long weekend and you want to know what are the cool boutiques to buy sneakers at in Boston or to buy, clothing at or whatever the hell it is, that's where you might want to show up if you are the little boutique that may or may not depend on foot traffic regularly, or what's the best place to get I don't know, an ice cream in Boston or something like that. So I think a lot of these businesses can and still do and have an element of them that relies on location and foot traffic and all those fundamental to small retail things. But you may want to think as well about how you show up in terms of how people might prompt AI for what you do in your city.
No, I think that's an interesting point because, the traditional A to B style of we have this thing on sale for this price or whatever may not be what you're trying to do. Maybe it is really, about becoming sort of a known entity for whatever reason. So I think that's a smart idea. So in your experience, obviously you've been riding this wave for some time. You've been in the career for a while now. What's something that you think that maybe you believe about AI marketing that most of your peers might disagree with? Like, is there some perspective that you've got on this that maybe sort of skirts the main, the public discourse?
I have one, and I'm going to be a little I admit that it's a kind of a greasy opinion. I feel a little greasy sharing it. So there's a lot of companies, and this is particularly true of B2B software, but it's true of other companies as well. There's a type of content that AI loves to surface, and I'll call it a best of listicle. So this is generally where we say, if I was doing this for myself, what are the top 10 tech PR agencies? You write a listicle and you put yourself as number one. And, other competitors are numbers 2 through 10. There's a lot of people who say this is an old black hat SEO tactic. This is bullshit. You should not do this. Not only is it very bad for your karma, but there's technical reasons that it doesn't work. I guess it works for us, though. So we've done it, and we've done it successfully. And I don't really feel great about saying that. I do believe we are a great agency, but it is a tactic that is a little greasier, doesn't always feel awesome to do because that's not kind of the way I was raised, and that's probably not the way most people were raised, but it works for now. And my thing is, if it works for now, do it. The only other thing that I would add, and I said it before and I said it already, and it's less a tactic that people advocate or don't advocate for. Maybe it's a thing people don't advocate for. So many of these programs now don't survey first, and you just can end up optimizing for the wrong LLM. So in addition to my maybe controversial take on listicles and best of lists, I think one of the things, if people take anything away from this and are wondering where they start with geo, start with monitoring. And the second thing is ask your customers what LLMs they use and how they use them and what kind of prompts they enter. You need this. If you don't, you are running blind.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and it's funny. I mean, even with your, quote, greasy point, like, most of those lists are kind of made up anyway.
Yeah.
They're kind of, it can be coming from, some tech magazine or whatever. But it's, they ask 9 guys in the office to weigh in on what they like or whatever,
And they have affiliate links. There's affiliate links in there, right?
Before in the old days, and they have high engagement now. They just always have done well. People like to look at those lists. And, as I've done, shopping for more expensive items and things like that over the year, I look at those things and I actually find them pretty hard to use because it's difficult to know who's good and who isn't from that list alone. But from the standpoint of driving traffic or starting to come up in lists or query, it makes perfect sense that would be a source to go to. So
And LLMs like the format. A well-structured listicle, LLMs love that format. It's easier for them to go onto a site and extract information. The other thing, and people have, it's a kind of a bad cousin of listicles, is the sort of side-by-side comp piece. So further down the funnel, when I've discovered what the 10 best agencies are, I might say, what about agency A versus agency B? You want content that sort of gets at that too. And guess what? If you're agency A, you're going to say that agency A is the best. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's one thing that I've really noticed in different LLMs, and in fact, I had an experience this morning in Claude that was kind of like this, which is, I don't know, they're a little like my teenage son. They'll take the lazy version first. They'll do the easiest thing first. And so I was just trying to put together a list of people who are featured in my book. And so I was like, hey, look at this manuscript, pull out all the people in the book. And because I'm sending letters to everybody who appeared in the book. And so I had it do that, but it left off a bunch of key names. And then it came back and it's like, oh, well, you should consider this guy. He'd be a great name to bring up. And I was like, well, yeah, but he was in the book. Why didn't you add him to the list? Oh, well, because I looked at this. I didn't look at that. It's like, oh, okay. So you just did the easiest amount of work you could. You saved yourself a few tokens or whatever. But it's like you didn't save me any money. I'm still charging. I'm still being paid for all that. So it's kind of funny, but I mean, it does make sense that those kinds of things might perform well because, to your point, it's a quick read. It's an instant glance. I can grab a piece of data. I don't have to do real research, but I can still come back with a result. I mean, it does exactly what these GPT tools want, or these different chatbots use, which is, it seems like they like the path of least resistance sometimes. So being able to find something like that is a good idea.
A lazy intern on a Friday afternoon, we're waiting for the party, waiting for that 5:05 drink.
Exactly. No, it's so funny. So we've talked about it a little bit, but here in our last few minutes, is there anything that we missed? What are the questions companies should be asking that they're not asking yet?
So I think a couple of questions that people I don't think are asking that they should be asking is, like, if we are going to do this, how much money and how much time can we put into it? And so, just for context, I think if we think in terms of time, because budgets vary, and I would say that budgets for this could be very, very small for a small local business. You can spend several $1 million a year if you are a bigger enterprise on this, no problem. But a smaller business can spend, somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 a month if it wants. That's the first thing, and then the amount of time and input it's going to take. So similar to traditional blue link SEO, this is not a fast channel. This is not a Google ad or a Facebook ad where you can kind of turn it on, and if you're getting it right early or you're optimizing quickly, you can start seeing conversions. This is going to take, in our experience, usually like 14 to 20 weeks to show results. And that 14 to 20 weeks, if you think it's going to take 4 to 6, that feels like a heck of a long time, and it feels kind of like, whoa, what are we spending all this money on and all that? So it's a slow-paced channel, and I think those are two questions that we haven't had a lot. Like, we have the how much question, but we don't have the how long question. We usually have to explain the how long question to prospects and clients. And then
sorry. I was just
go ahead.
Dovetail on there or add on. I just wondered, just as an extension to that question, what about the? Is there kind of I don't know, let's say a dollar amount where it just doesn't really make sense to engage with a company at this point? Like, so if you mentioned 1,000 to 5K, that kind of was traditionally sort of if you wanted to buy into SEO or digital marketing or whatever, that was kind of the minimum threshold too. Is there a level where it just doesn't make sense to engage with a company, or you just shouldn't really be spending your money on it?
Our programs start at $12,000 a month. So, we are going to combine that with a PR program. So it's a very holistic approach. And that means that there's a lot of, kids in the sandbox, per my earlier analogy. And that's where we're going to start. But yeah, I don't think, I wouldn't be doing too much with under $3,000 or $4,000 a month, probably, if I was a smaller business. But, you have people already on staff. If you're sort of a mid-sized, I think of like a small local chain, let's say, or a chain that's in 2 or 3 cities or in a region or something like that, they already have probably content writers on staff. They may have somebody who's either full-time or freelance SEO. So they have some of the team in place already. It's just about allocating their time and what they're working on. And I think you can do that without too much extra spend. It's just about reallocating the spend. But I would say that's the level. And I think a lot of the agencies we've seen that are pricing this are starting are starting in and around where we are, maybe a little bit higher even. So I think that's going to be in the tech context for kind of a post A round company. If I was thinking about kind of VC backed firms and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, hey, Jackson, we're getting kind of to the end of the hour. Do you want to take a quick minute and just let people know where they can track you down if they want to maybe connect with you online someplace, or if they want to learn more about your business?
For sure. So proper propaganda, as it sounds, the word proper and then the word propaganda.net is the website. I am Jackson at properpropaganda.net, and I am on Substack as Jackson's Proper Substack. I publish on Substack about once a month. I'm not like super frequent. I won't bother your inbox too much. And then LinkedIn, Jackson Wightman on LinkedIn. Wightman is Wightman.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jackson. This has been super informative. Tons of good information in there. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thanks to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.